We're going to take a look at how to style forms using CSS. So here's a form that's been pre-created. Some of the characteristics that you've learned previously. We've got text inputs, we've got email address and password inputs, we've got radio buttons, check boxes, text areas, drop down. We've got a little JavaScript button over here with our submit and reset buttons over here. The whole thing is set with a frame set and a legend which breaks into the frame set box. So pretty much what we've been learning to do. And if we take a look at the code, you'll notice that the code has got pairings of inputs with labels. So here's first name and here's last name. And these are text inputs. And then here's email, which is an email type input. And here is a password with a password type input. And in all of these cases, not all of them it looks like, you've got the word required. Let me add this to that one. So the word required, if you recall, is an HTML5 attribute that imposes HTML5 form validation. So people cannot submit the form unless those fields are filled out. We could continue that, but for the time being, let's just look at, here's one that's a radio button, so yes or no button, it has to be one or the other. And then here's a checkbox, what cheeses do you like, and there's 3 choices. And with the checkbox you can choose more than one if you like. And then here's a drop down menu, and here's a text area. Here's our JavaScript button, which we're not going to really do anything with here. But one thing I wanted to point out was that in a couple of circumstances, like the radio button and the checkbox, you actually have multiple inputs that work together. This is like a radio button set. They have the same ID number, and then what differs between these inputs is the value. Same thing with checkboxes. With checkboxes, you've got this one's called favorite, and so all of these inputs have the same ID, but what differs with them, actually the name should probably be the same as well now that I think about it. Anyway, what differs with these is the I'm sorry, my brain has just gone sideways here. What differs from these is that because they have multiple inputs, we don't necessarily want those inputs to act independently. We want them to act as a group. We want the radio buttons to stack up. We want the checkboxes to kind of combine together. And so what I've done ahead of time is just created a div as a container. So this div contains these inputs, this div contains those inputs, and I've labeled it with a class called container, although I have not yet created that class in the style sheet. Alright, so what we want to do is create styles for this, and I'm going to start at the top and move down. All right. So first thing, these two things can compete: the form and the field set. So the form is the container, the DOM model container for the form, right? And as such, it follows the box model, and I could give it a width and a height, and I could center it, and I could give it background color, and I could give it a border, and all those sorts of things. The odd thing about this is the field set. The field set is a border of its own. Well, strangely enough, the form and the field set don't necessarily get interpreted as the same dimensions. So if I were to say put a border on my form and I also have a border on my field set, they may conflict. If I have a background on my form versus a background on the field set, they may conflict. So rule of thumb, I would do most things with the form tag because it is your overall container. But when it comes to backgrounds and borders, I would probably refer to the field set for those. Okay, so having said that, let's go ahead and put in a style for form. I'm doing this as an internal style sheet or an embedded style sheet. You could just as well do it as an external style sheet. In fact, if you have an external style sheet for a site with multiple pages, you should be using your external style sheet so you have a consistent look and feel with the rest of the pages in the site. Alright, so form. Let's say that we want to constrict the width of this form. We'll make it 50% of the page. Maybe we want to give it a background color. Let's make it light blue. Um, oh, you know what? I just went back on what I just said, right? So I'm going to hit X on this and say field set and put the background color on the field set. All right, coming back to the form, the other thing I want to do here is center it. So I do margin auto. Okay, and then width, centered, background color. All right, I think that's a good start. So let's save those changes and let's take a look at what it looks like now. All right, so now our form is centered and it's 50% width of the page. Okay, so that's a good start. All right, next let's take a look at this legend right here. It's fine, but it's kind of small. It kind of gets lost in contrast to the rest of the form text. So let's make it stand out like a headline. So we can do legend, and for our legend we can say maybe font family Arial, font weight is bold. Maybe we do font size is 24 pixels, or just 24. And so far so good. There is one thing we'll come back to with this. So here's my form headline. One thing that's interesting about the form headline, which kind of irritates me, is that it's half in and half out of the field set, and so the background color kind of chops it in half, kind of slices it, which you might be more pronounced if you did something like had a tag for your body with a different background color. Let's see. Let's go with light steel blue. I like that color combination. Okay, so actually it doesn't look too bad. Maybe just because those colors are kind of close together, but typically if these colors are majorly contrasting, it really slices that headline in half. And so one thing you can do is for your legend, you can give it its own background color. Easter's coming up here by the time I'm recording this video, so let's make it pink. I'll go for an Easter egg kind of effect here. Yeah, that's nice. That's not, these colors are kind of silly, but the idea here is by giving it its own background, you don't get that slice and half scenario going. So I like that. Okay, let's move on down the list here. Next thing I'm thinking about wanting to take care of are these inputs. Right now they're all kind of bunched up together. You might, in the HTML, separate them with BRs, line breaks, BR tags, and that's fine. Except even if you do that, they're still not gonna line up pretty because all of these labels are different lengths, and the inline nature of the input means it's just going to follow right after the label, and so they're not going to line up and look super nice. So what I want to do is I want to try to create the situation where my labels kind of line up flush right, and then all my inputs kind of line up flush left, and there's a nice uniform gutter or column between the two. And so I'm going to try to accomplish that through styles. So because I have these pairings, label, input, I can flush all my labels to the left, or float all my labels to the left, and allow all the inputs to work on the right. So if we look at the label, we can make this a block element. The idea of making it a block element is just that previously it's an inline element, and so I can control it easier if I can think about it and treat it like a box, which is what happens if I turn it into a block element. Now block elements by default will fill up the width of their container, In this case, the container is the form. And so if I want the ability for the input to float float around it or fill in around it when I float it to the left, then I need to give it a width. So let's say that we just make the width 50% of its container, which is the form itself. All right, and then we want to float it to the left. And we want to align the text to the right. And then to make sure there's a nice getter in between them, we'll do some margin right, which would be maybe, let's say 10 pixels. That might be too much, but we'll start there and see how it looks. Okay. And then I know I know this isn't enough, but I'm going to start with making my input tags a display block as well. And that should get us started. Alright, so if we save those changes and refresh this page, alright, so something didn't go right here. So we're going to have to investigate. Essentially what's going on here is that my labels are all flush left, but my inputs are not floating around them like I would have expected. So let's investigate. Label, display block, width is 50%. Oh, this is why right here. I got a colon instead of a semicolon. Alright, save that. Refresh. Alright, there we go. So this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for all my labels to be lined up on the right and all my inputs to be lined up on the left. And it's looking really good and uniform until we get here. Okay. Now these are these problem spots that I mentioned earlier. What's going on in these situations is I've got multiple inputs. And so these multiple inputs try to float around this label, but once they exceed the height in rows of the label, they wrap all the way to the left margin. And so what I need to do there is take advantage of treating them as a block. Okay, so over here I've got my inputs set to display as a block, but what I need to do is treat these items, radio and checkbox, as collections in a container rather than individual inputs. Now, in order for this to work, I have to separate these inputs from this style, and in order to do that, I'm going to have to reference the rest of the inputs by their type, so I can differentiate one input type from another. Okay, so the way you would do that is you can actually put a property here, such as type equals text. And so what that does is it says don't affect this style to all inputs, only affect the style to inputs that have the type set to text. So that'll affect first name and last name. It shouldn't affect email or password. I found in the past in certain contexts it doesn't matter, but if I'm concerned about it, what I can do is I can copy this and paste it a couple of times with commas to separate them, and then just make sure I'm including email and password as types as well. Right? Okay, so if I do that, then what I want to do is I want to create a container for these. So I can I used a class, so I specified class down here when I created this div tag. So I'll just do .class here, and then for my .class, I just want to do the same thing. I want to display a block. And you might ask, well, what difference does it make if it's coming out of the same thing? Well, the difference is that, remember, I said .class. I'm sorry, it should be .container. So remember that the point here is that I don't want these inputs to act independently. So I pull them out of that input class and input style, and then I do want them to act collectively, so I reapply that style to their container. So it's the container that's being displayed as a block, not the individual inputs in the case of radio buttons and checkboxes. Alright, so I say save to that, refresh, and now most of my things are lining up, right? I've got my my text fields, my email, and my password fields. I've got my radio buttons, and I've got my checkboxes acting as containers, acting as one in a container. So now I need to but now I need to deal with this drop-down menu and also this text area. They're bunching up, and I need them to not bunch up. So what I can do is I can add them to this list. Like this list includes different inputs that are being controlled by this particular style, and that's not going to include my drop-down because it's not of type input, it's of type select, and it's not going to include my text area because that's type text area, not type input. So we can go up here and simply add those things with commas to this list. Let's see what that does. Alright, now they line up. If you want to continue to make this look a little bit more uniform, you could even impose some things like here in this style, we could say width equals, I don't know, maybe 200 pixels. And basically what I'm doing there is I'm saying make all of these different inputs the same width. So now instead of these being a different width from this, when we refresh this, it didn't work. Let me fix that. What happened? Oh, look what I did. I'm acting like it's an attribute instead of a style. Alright, save. Refresh. Alright, now they're all the same width. Looks a little bit more uniform. That sort of thing. So that's probably the main things that have to do with a form specifically. I could, continue to tweak things that are just standard style issues. For instance, I'd like there to be more space between these different rows. So what I'll do here within inputs is I'll just say margin bottom maybe 5 pixels, and I want that to be the same with this container. So I'll make this margin 5 pixels. Maybe we can do something like even all the way up to the body. We could do something like change the font. So this will affect the entire page. How about Calibri? It's a good sans serif font. What else can we do here? Oh, maybe on my field set I could make it look a little stylistic by giving it a corner radius. Say 25 pixels. Just rounding the corners of the field set box. We're looking for a font change. We're looking for space between our field inputs. We're looking for a rounded corner. Refresh. Okay, didn't get the rounded corner. I did get the font change, and I did get space between the inputs. Let's investigate as to why I didn't get the rounded corner. Corner radius 25 pixels. That's because I put it on the wrong thing. So if we look at our... No, the legend didn't work either. I put it on the legend instead of field set. I just made a mistake as far as where I put it. So right here is where it would go, inside the field set. Save. Refresh. Still didn't work. Alright, what am I doing wrong? Because it's not corner radius, it's border radius. Save. So what I'm doing here is I'm demonstrating troubleshooting techniques. Yeah, that's what you can say. Oops. That's what you can say when you're making mistakes. I'm not making mistakes. I'm demonstrating troubleshooting techniques. Alright, there's finally my corner radius. Alright, so I'm happy about that. Okay, so not bad. I've used CSS to create background colors. I could control this border if I wanted to, but I did give it a corner. I could give it a width or color or both. We lined up our labels and our inputs, made them a uniform width, made them uniform spacing between them. Yeah, so I'm happy with this, and I hope that helps.